It's hour 2 of Overdrive. Gord Miller, Jason Strudwick's in Edmonton with us. Dave Feschuk's here in Toronto in the studio. Overdrive brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. We got lots to talk about. Randy Ambrosie, the CFL Commissioner, will be joining us in a few minutes. And when you're the commissioner of that league, it feels like you always have the fireman's hat on.
Yeah.
It just always feels like there's always some little burning brush fire to a house fire to a 6-alarm blade.
Yeah, it's not an easy gig.
No.
Not an easy gig. He's had a lot of headaches this year from the Chad Kelly suspension, now the Shawn Lemon sports gambling suspension, which puts the league in an unflattering light, because we all know about the gambling scandals that have rocked various sports, from the NBA with Jonte Porter being suspended for life by the commissioner. I mean, Struddy, I don't know. Would you want to be a commissioner, Struddy? Do you see it as a viable career path for yourself?
Not for me, that's for sure.
Well, the way Struddy settled grievances was not the way most people would like to see it done. So
yeah, no, I'm a pacifist now, though, Gord, pacifist. But I think that I also don't love long meetings. I don't think that'd be for me. But what a challenge, right? I think that COVID affected sports in a different way, but I think for the CFL is very unkind to it. And I think people sometimes found other things to do, although in some locations it seems to be doing quite well. There's others where it's struggling. So to try to get young people back into those stadiums, engaged in that sport, is a big challenge. The NFL seems to get there through fantasy football, and I think the CFL may try that. It's tricky, though. It's tricky to get the young people into it.
The NFL's a whole different animal. I really don't think you can compare the NFL to any other pro sport.
No.
It's a completely different. It's once a week. It's a behemoth. It's not like any other sport.
Yeah. If by once a week you mean Thursday, Friday, sometimes Saturday, but always Sunday and Monday.
But your team only plays once a week, though, and it's incredible. And
I know what you mean.
But Jason, what's going on in Edmonton with the Elks, which is still not a popular? I still have a hard time saying it, to be honest. I have a hard time spitting out Elks.
Well, there's a large segment of the fan base that has not taken to the new name. There's now a new owner. It's the community. It was a community-owned team for I think 75 years, and now there's a new person in charge who's been a season ticket holder for a long time and a big fan of the team. And it'd be interesting to see what he does. The team has played better, right? It's hard to get people to come to games when your team is struggling. They have played better. They almost beat Montreal, the best team in the league. What did they lose by a field goal? I think the other night, Sunday night. So yeah, they're getting some traction, but it's been really rough. The last 5-6 months in 2018-19, it's been really rough for the fan base in Edmonton to rally around their team. Then you factor in a few other outside forces, and the team has a lot of work. The new owner's going to have to be very, very busy to get this team back up to where they were even 15, 20 years ago.
And that's the challenge, right? I mean, no matter what league you have, your bottom end teams are going to struggle.
Mm-hmm.
But in a league that only has 9 teams, you're gonna have it stands out more. In the NFL, you don't see the bad teams very often. They don't play on Thursday night for the most part. They're sprinkled through, but you don't see them on Sunday afternoons, on Sunday night, on Monday night.
You don't have to pay attention to them until they draft number 1.
Right. No, it's true, right? I mean, and so in other sports like the NHL, you see these teams that struggle at the gate, and I mean, the Chicago White Sox in baseball are having this death march of a season, and it's out there for everyone to see. But at some point, the CFL's resilience is really something, and this is the Labor Day weekend is kind of their second half kickoff.
Right.
This is when they gain. Edmonton plays Calgary, Toronto plays Hamilton, the Winnipeg, Saskatchewan back to back. It's when they September comes, it feels more like football.
Yeah, without a doubt. No, this is the marquee weekend in a lot of ways, right? Where you really start digging in and looking toward the Grey Cup, and look, this is, in a lot of ways, guys, this has a recipe to be a very special CFL season, because of the strange circumstances that brought 2 quarterbacks with elite credentials back into the league in the middle of the season.
Right.
One of them kind of unexpectedly in Nathan Rourke, and the other one in Chad Kelly, always a bit of a wild card. No one was really sure exactly how that was going to go down. You've got 2 guys who can theoretically be the 2 best players in the league joining teams on the fly. I think that really is, it could be a blueprint for something really special down the stretch.
All right, we've set the table. Let's eat. Joining us on the Maple Toyota Hotline, the Commissioner of the Canadian Football League, Randy Ambrosie. Randy, thanks for joining us.
Gord, it's good to join you. Hey, is this the legendary Gord Miller, by the way?
No.
Is there any other?
There's a former.
There is only one Gord Miller, and he is legendary. And of course, nice to talk to you, Jason and Dave, as well.
There was a Gord Miller was the environment commissioner of Ontario.
Okay,
but we don't get mixed up very often. Randy, we have lots to get to here. I want to talk to you first of all about the news of the day, which is that an independent arbitrator has upheld the indefinite suspension of Shawn Lemon for gambling. What's your take on it, and how much damage do you think that story did to the league?
Well, look, in the end, we were very pleased with the arbitrator's decision, and look, I think it demonstrated that that our suspension was appropriate, and in the end, I think that's what mattered. I think it was an unfortunate situation with Shawn Lemon. It was uncovered, it was dealt with, and I believe as we discussed during the arbitration hearing, I think we needed to send a very strong message to our players. We need to send a strong message to everyone in the league that you cannot be involved in gambling on CFL games, and you certainly can't gamble on a game you're involved in. And hopefully this is all behind us now, with everyone understanding very clearly that that behavior won't be tolerated.
So, Randy, let's be blunt about this. This is a show sponsored by a gambling company. There's lots of gambling advertising at CFL games. How do you balance that, the revenue and all that comes with it, with the integrity issue of making sure that gambling doesn't affect your on-field product?
Well, yeah. So, Gord, I think it's a great question, and I'll answer it this way. Look, I think what this situation, what it highlights is that if a player or anyone involved in the league does gamble on a game, a CFL game, they're going to get caught. I think what this actually does is highlight that this actually reinforces that we will have full and complete integrity, because if somebody makes a misstep, they're going to get caught. I think that's point number one. And then I think number two, it highlights that if you get caught, you're going to be dealt with severely. So, Gord, I think it really does reinforce the core principles. It can't be done, and if you do it, you'll get caught, and you'll be punished severely. Hopefully, that's the end of it. And then, frankly, the balance of it is about how this is. It does create an opportunity for fan engagement. It does make it a little more fun. Look, we've said over and over again. We've said this with the gaming partners. We said, look, we don't ever want a CFL fan to bet their grocery money or their rent money or their mortgage money on a CFL game. We just don't want that. But would we love to see fans put down a small bet, on a game to make it a little more fun, a little more engaging? Of course we would. And we think that's what this opportunity creates for us, is just a little more fan engagement, a little more connection to the game. But, we are going to continue, along with our gaming partners, we're going to continue to emphasize we don't want anyone to gamble inappropriately. We don't want anyone to gamble money they can't afford to gamble with. And hopefully that message is resonating. And then if that's the case, which we believe it can be, we're going to continue with that public service messaging. Then hopefully we create a safe, appropriate environment for sports gambling, and again, on the other side, we make it clear to anyone who isn't supposed to gamble on games that if you do it, you get caught.
Randy, another situation you've had to deal with this season is, of course, the suspension of the league's reigning most outstanding player, Chad Kelly, missing the first 9 games of the season for violation of the league's gender-based violence policy. There was a lot of hemming and hawing about whether or not he would be back after those 9 games, Randy. And I know we've learned that there were some details thrown into the reinstatement agreement, including something that's been termed a last chance clause for Mr. Kelly. When you look back at how that process unfolded, how do you feel about it, and how do you feel about the outcome?
Well, look, I think you got to go back, and I think that's the right word. Process. Look, we started this whole thing by making sure that we understood the situation. We launched an investigation immediately after we learned of the incident. That investigation took time to be completed. At that point, we spoke with gender-based violence consultants. We sought their input on what would be appropriate. We looked at precedent, our own and other leagues, and then we made a decision. And in terms of the process following that, Chad had to go through counseling sessions. He had to undergo 2 assessments. He did that. We got those reports back. And then, one of the final steps was sitting down with them. Look, one of the things I would say about Chad Kelly that I felt very good about is when we sat with him that Friday afternoon, I guess 2 weeks ago, we sat with him. And I thought he demonstrated a significant contrition. He opened the session with an unqualified acknowledgement of the mistakes he's made. We sat and listened to him. He spoke freely. He was very earnest in his assessment of his own behavior. And then at the end of that, he, of his own volition, he basically said, "Look, I'm making you a promise. This will never happen again." And as it related to, the final outcome, I think what we said is we're going to hold you accountable to that promise that it will never happen again. And that's what the punctuation on this was. It can't happen again. You've made some mistakes. You've acknowledged them. You appear to have learned from them. I think we're hoping that Chad will be a spokesperson to explain to men and boys that kind of behavior is inappropriate. Hopefully, some good can come of this if he can be a good messenger, and then ultimately, as we would expect, that he will be to his word, that we'll never see this happen with him, and frankly, maybe through his learning experience. We can slowly and hopefully permanently create an environment that is safe for everyone who works in the world of sports.
Randy, there's a new owner for the Edmonton Football Club, and I wonder what your expectations would be for the club moving forward. And then, does a new owner, does it bring new, not challenges, but new ideas, new energy to a rather small ownership group of CFL owners?
Well, look, I think first of all, this is an ownership group, from Amar Doman in BC, right across the country. Pierre Carl Palado joining 2 years ago, and now Larry Thompson. This is the strongest ownership group in the history of the league. It's, I think it's fair to say, an iconic ownership group. And in Edmonton, certainly when we sat with Larry through the process, he is incredibly committed to restoring the glory of that franchise, of which there is a lot of glory. I've had the proud opportunity to play in that city, play for that football team. I know how much football means in the city of Edmonton, and I think Larry is just remarkably committed to seeing that come back. And again, you're right; he's going to bring a lot of energy, a lot of commitment to getting them on the right track. And and on a really positive note, I got a pretty good football team with 3 wins, and Calgary having 4 wins, and 3 teams in the West having 5 wins. I think it is safe to say basically the West is wide open, and we will not know for several weeks kind of how the West is going to turn out. But I'm very excited about the future in Edmonton, as I am, across the league. I think this group of owners, it's a special group, and it's an exclusive club.
We're talking to CFL Commissioner Randy Ambrosie. Randy, we had Sean Payton, now the coach of the Denver Broncos, on this program last year, and he was talking about how NFL owners, coaches, managers have watched the CFL review process, and they kind of looked at it, and they actually expanded theirs a little bit after watching what you've done. But the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of talk about how the command centers handle things and how you're changing things. How have the changes worked, and are you confident that it'll work going forward?
Yeah, look, I'm almost say, Gord, I'm not so much characterizing them as changes. I think it's just we wanted a reminder that we went, that the principle on which our command center functions is a clear and obvious standard. And I think for reasons that I'm not entirely sure we'll ever understand, but they started drifting a little bit away from that clear and obvious. And what we wanted a situation where a game in our league wouldn't be won or lost on what was clearly and obviously an error. What we don't want is we don't want two sets of officiating crews. We've got a really good set of officials that are on the field week in and week out, game in and game out. We want them to officiate the game. We want our command center to make sure that if there is a clear and obvious mistake made, that it can be corrected. And so this was just a little nudge back to what our standard has always been. And I'm confident that it's going to take us to where we want to be, and that is, again, let's just make sure that our games don't get decided on a clear and obvious error.
Well, if one thing that gets people riled up, Randy, is video review that is contentious. Another thing that I'm not sure I've seen so much emotion about was the way the Argos game was decided in Chad Kelly's return last week with the walk-off rouge. Randy, we had Milt Stegall pounding the table saying you should not be able to win a game when you fail at a field goal. How do you feel about the walk-off rouge, and do you need to look at potential alternatives when it comes to game-winning plays?
Well, look, I saw Milt having that moment. I thought it was entertaining, as Milt always is. and what I can say is this: look, it has been discussed not every off season during the Rules Committee process, but it gets discussed a lot. And on one hand, you've got a very strong bias to that traditional view that this is part of our league. It's what helps to make us distinctive. And that argument is almost always founded in it's about field position and defending field position, and it's not so much a giveaway of a point as it is if you did a poor job of defending your field position, you gave up a point. So that's one side. The other side is maybe unless the ball can't be returned. If the ball can't be returned, maybe there shouldn't be a point. And I expect that we'll end up having a lively, robust, and sometimes entertaining conversation this offseason with a group of passionate CFL coaches and general managers who love this game, and they do. And I expect that we'll engage in that, and there'll be this, that game will serve as an example of what some people will think shouldn't happen. It'll be an example for some to say, well, that's what should happen. And then it'll be, as I say, it'll be lively, it'll be intense, and ultimately we'll see where the group wants to take us. And then, of course, all of that to say it ultimately has to go through our team presidents and then on to our governors. So there'll be a lot of discussion. I love when our fans get involved in this. I think it's one of the things that makes our league special. We're very close to our fans. They know that their voice matters, and I like it when they feel comfortable to share their opinions, and they share it quite vociferously, as you might have noticed.
Well, where do you stand, Randy? I mean, you've played, you've been a competitor. Yeah. Where are you on this?
Well, look, if you want to have a little fun with it, I'm totally in favor of it if it helped me win a game, and I'd hate it if I lost because of it. Okay, so
come on, get off the fence. Yeah. Come on, Commissioner.
Listen, I am perfect. As you know, I am very petite, and I can perch on top of that fence as good as anybody. No, I mean,
it's wobbling. It's wobbling.
It's wobbling. Yeah, no, the fence is definitely wobbling. Yeah, you know what? Listen, I've listened to both sides of it, and on any given day, I can kind of go, depending on how eloquent the argument is, I can be convinced one way or the other. Look, if pressed, I think I'd be in favor of, at the very least, considering a small adjustment. I'd be in favor of at least considering it. But there's a lot of steps that we'd have to go through, and there's a lot of people we'd have to convince of that. And that part of the process, I'd be very interested in being part of that process, and where it takes us, I don't know. But again, the two sides both make very good arguments. You heard Milt's, and the other side, frankly, when they have their turn, they make their argument pretty well, almost as well as Milt does.
All right, Randy, before we let you go, we've heard about Touchdown Atlantic for a number of years, but now it's Touchdown Pacific this weekend, Ottawa and BC in Victoria. I understand you're there for it. Tell us what that's going to look like.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely fantastic. Well, look, I'm here. City is beautiful. The stadium is coming together. You know, you got to start with the Mardoman. This is his hometown. He said on day one when he bought the Lions, he wanted to make it clear that the BC Lions belong to the entire province. You know, training camps in Kamloops, now a game here on Vancouver Island in the beautiful city of Victoria. Been over to the stadium. It's going to be spectacular. On Saturday afternoon, it is going to be the place to be in Canada. Look, it's one of 4 amazing Labor Day matchups. And again, just based on the standings, look, every game this weekend is going to matter a lot. You go to Hamilton on Monday, where the Ticats played well against Winnipeg. You know they're going to be tough at home against Toronto. You've got Calgary and Edmonton. That game matters a lot. 4-win Calgary, 3-win Edmonton. That's going to matter a ton. And then, of course, Sunday night in Regina. What a game that'll be. 2 heavyweights battling it out. And then here and Amar Doman wanted to be part of the Labor Day weekend conversation. He's talked about that with me very early on. He said, he just doesn't like BC not being included in the Labor Day weekend. Well, I think he's found a way to very much be part of the Labor Day weekend story coming here to Victoria. So I just think it's shaping up to be a remarkable weekend. Some great football will be played. And as it always is on Labor Day, the stakes are a little bit higher.
Randy, thanks so much for talking to us. Very forthright. We appreciate it. And good luck this weekend.
Good to talk to all of you guys. Have a great and happy Labor Day long weekend to all of you and all of your listeners.
Thanks very much, Randy. All right, so I'm going to ask you, Jason, the question because you kind of ducked out of this, but I want to know, should you be able to win a game on a missed field goal?
No, I'm with Milt. I saw Milt talk about it. I saw the game highlights. And to me, as I was watching, like, okay, he missed it. We're going to go to continue on. Well, that doesn't work that way. You can't win something when you've failed doing something else. Like, I just don't understand that. It'd be like in a shootout if the team that gets the last shot doesn't score, but he credit with the shot on goal, so now he gets the win. It's a technicality. I don't like it at all. I don't want it at all. I think what it should do is just at that moment eliminate. So on anything that's it's pretty simple wording. If it's a chance to win the game, that point can't be the difference maker.
Well, I think,
but hang on, it could be the difference maker 10 minutes earlier.
True.
If no one scores afterwards, I mean, it could still win a game. Well, not a walk-off, but it could still win a game.
Yeah,
but there's time. There's time to make it up.
Yeah, no, I think there could be a time-based rule. It could be like in the last 2 minutes you can't get a rouge in the last 2 minutes, period. But I liked Randy's point about I think there's a difference. Like the kicks that go through the back of the end zone after it misses going through the posts, those to me, those are the cheap ones. Like if you kick one that goes into the end zone and they have a chance to return it, I think that should be fair game. If the team can, so has a chance field goal to return
kicker,
it.
If you miss, make sure you miss short enough.
Don't blast it through.
You're gonna put that in the kicker's head with the game on the line?
Well, hey, I mean, you're not trying to miss, right? But if it's a long enough field goal that it lands in the end zone and they've got to run it out, to me, that's a legitimate point. Like if they, if you can hem them in the end zone, that to me makes sense as the rouge rule. But kicking it through the back of the end zone to win the game, it's, I understand the field position argument, but it doesn't, it rings a little hollow.
Struddy, last word.
Listen, Milt's been around a long time, so I'm going to go with someone who's a veteran, who's a really elite player in that league, and I'm guessing that other elite players feel the same way. And even though it hurts me to say this, usually elite athletes kind of get that right, and they get it their way. Okay, there it is. The last word to Jason Strudwick. I'm okay with it. Yeah. I can live with it. That was Randy Ambrosie joining us on the Maple Toyota Hotline. Check out Maple Toyota's huge truck and SUV lineup, including Tundra, 4Runner, Highlander, and Grand Highlander, in stock and ready to deliver. Visit mapletoyota.com. We are on a roll here. Randy Ambrosie was great. And coming up next, one of our favorites, Darren Robert Pang, NHL analyst for TNT, former NHL goalie, and all-around lively personality, will join us on TSN Overdrive on TSN2, the TSN app, and your home speakers. Overdrive on this Wednesday afternoon. Gord Miller sitting in for Brian Hayes. He's off for the next couple of days. We've got Jason Strudwick, Struddy in Edmonton with us, and we got Dave Feschuk here in the studio. Darren Pang is going to join us in a minute. Coming up at the top of the next hour, we'll talk to Jim Duquette, former Major League Baseball executive, and later on, Mark Ross from the NFL Network will join us to talk about the upcoming start to the NFL season. We've been talking a little bit about, young players and NHL players in general
kind of gaining more power and using their voice. And Struddy, I think back to, when you were playing junior and the waves that Eric Lindros made when he refused to go to Quebec back in 1992 when he was drafted by the Nordiques. He forced that trade to Philadelphia, and that kind of changed the landscape. But even then, with all that happened with Lindros and what we've seen since, we don't see NHL players nearly as vocal and using their power like certainly NBA players, football players, and baseball players. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think that it feels like hockey's always a little bit behind in some ways. Even now we're starting to see top players maybe take shorter contracts so they can benefit from the jump in salary cap. That's something you see in other sports, specifically the NBA. But my concern when you start talking about the idea of players, young players specifically, kind of dictating where they want to go, is are we going to get to a situation where a team has to say, we're drafting 11s. We have to find out if Feschuk would come play for us in City A, and have that discussion. I think that becomes, to use your words, Gord, a really slippery slope, because now there's a lot of power at that draft about what can happen, and that favors perhaps destinations that are more, or like the New York, Chicago's, LA's, and Nashville, those type of places. I think that's where it gets really, really dangerous. And I am more traditionalist. Like, if you get drafted, you should be happy you get drafted and honored, and you go to that team and try to lift that team up.
Look, Struddy, I see where you're coming from, but I mean, isn't sort of knowing if a guy wants to play for you called doing your due diligence? Like, aren't you supposed to know these guys? If you intend on wasting a first-round pick or using a first-round pick, if you're not wasting it on a player, you better know inside out what the kid is like. Is he interested in playing in your market? Will he have a problem with playing in your market? Will he have a problem with your plan to develop him? Because when you look at this Rutger McGroarty situation, a lot of signs point to it's not so much about Winnipeg, the destination, because the kid grew up in Nebraska. It's not like he's but it was more about, hey, they didn't want me to play. They didn't have plans for me to play on the NHL roster this coming season, and maybe I feel like I'm ready to play on an NHL roster this coming season. So, I see where you're coming from, Struddy. It should be an honor, but I also think there's a lot on teams to prove that they have a program that can maximize players' potential. And if you can't convince a kid of that, you can't convince a kid's agent, and let's face it, his parents, because parents are very involved in these decisions too, especially in the National Hockey League, then maybe you've got work to do as an organization on your sales pitch.
And I guess my answer to that would be that, my kids like to have chocolate every night for supper, but I don't allow them to do that. So I think as an organization, you have to say, hey, we believe this is the best path for you. It's interesting. I kind of listened to Rutger's press conference today with Pittsburgh, and he said, I've only been guaranteed a spot in the Raw Rookie League. So what's changed, because I did hear the same thing. He wanted to play in the NHL. So now all of a sudden Pittsburgh's okay if he's only guaranteed a spot in that rookie game or that rookie series and not any NHL time. It just gets confusing. And so I guess that I've got to give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe that wasn't the case, that, that he didn't expect time in Winnipeg. But if it wasn't that, so what is it then, right? And I think that's where, to me, it gets simple, because you can't say, hey, would you come play for us? Because then it maybe puts you in the mind, well, I don't really want to play in Winnipeg, or I want to go play with Sidney Crosby, I want to play with Connor McDavid or whatever. And that's where it really gets complicated. I think it makes the draft way more complicated and way harder than it is for teams to hit on players.
Let's bring Darren Pang into the conversation. Darren Pang, a longtime NHL broadcaster, former broadcast partner of mine, I must say. Always good to buy you a glass of wine after a game. Darren Pang, without exception, will buy you a glass of wine after a game, whether you deserve it or not. Panger, thanks for joining us. We've been talking a little bit throughout the program. We had Barry Trotz on earlier, talking about the Askarov situation in Nashville. We've been talking about Nick Robertson in Toronto, about Holloway and Broberg in Edmonton. How do you feel about younger players maybe having more of a voice now and using what little power they have?
Yeah, great to be with you guys today. And I do love a nice big glass of red wine after a difficult broadcast, doing what we all love. There's nothing stressful about broadcasting hockey, right, Gord? It's the best. I find it, it goes against, my era. Of course, I played in the 21 team league.
The original 21.
It wasn't much of an option. Yeah, remember that? Only 21 teams. and you were looked upon or frowned upon if that were to be the case. And maybe one of the first examples of that would have been Eric Lindros, not going to Quebec. Mario, it looked like he might not go to Pittsburgh. That was kind of a, whoa.
Wouldn't put the jersey on, remember, at the draft? Wouldn't put the jersey on at the draft?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in our era, it was definitely frowned upon. I mean, I had an opportunity. I'm just going to speak for myself. I after playing in the Memorial Cup and not being drafted, Larry Kelly was my agent, and he said, we've got Vancouver wants you to come to camp, Winnipeg wants you to come to camp, but we've got no contract. And I said, Larry, let's just look at their depth chart. Do I have a chance to play at least in the American Hockey League and not be stuck somewhere maybe in the East Coast League or at that time the IHL if that wasn't their top affiliate? And but at the end of the day, it was, oh my goodness, Vancouver and Winnipeg are invited me to go to their camp. I was thrilled. I was honored by that. I eventually signed with the Blackhawks and got a 2-year deal. But I just remember thinking the main goal is to put an NHL sweater on my back and to fulfill a dream that has been lifelong from the time personally that I was 5 years old, wanted to play in the NHL. That's all I wanted to do. I'm not sure if that's the case for some of these kids. I don't know. I do know that maybe in the system that we have today, once you commit to that team, it's a long time in getting out of that team, as we well know.
Right.
Once you have arb rights, then there's a small possibility of going against the team, the city, the organization, the general manager, the coach, whatever it might be. Some players, look at it like if I say I'm going there right now, I am there for 7 years, and there's going to be no out. And so, so for that, I give them applause for having the confidence to say that's not where I want to be for whatever reason. And then, go on their merry way. But when you do go to the new team, you've got a lot to prove.
Right.
And I think you'll be challenged at every turn because so many players still to this day think that no one's bigger than the game of hockey or the team that drafted you. So they'll always be difficult, as I would think. But if you're confident enough to make that statement to begin with, and you get your wish and your way, then I'm sure you're going to be a highly motivated player to prove everybody that you were right in what you decided.
Well, that's the interesting point, Darren. Like, as much as you can exert your power and exert your confidence, and as Barry Trotz talked to us today on Overdrive, the players do have some power here because no GM wants a problem on their roster if they can, make it go away. But on the other hand, like, how much do you think guys kind of put a bit of a target on their back in some ways by announcing that they're high maintenance, by announcing that they're me guys instead of team guys? And how do you think that factors into this dynamic?
Yeah, that's the part that I was talking about, it, being challenged at every turn once you make this kind of decision. And, I'll go to Askarov for a second. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, it's 2 years in Milwaukee, correct?
Yep.
The difference in my personal era is nobody signed 8-year contracts. Like, nobody signed 7-year contracts. Nobody signed 5-year contracts.
Right.
So, he's sitting there. It's not like he just got to Milwaukee. He's sitting there. He spent 2 years. He is gradually developing. Some people don't like his antics, whether you like him or not, how he acts. But he's probably thinking, like, wait a second here. They just signed UC Saros to this deal. Like, he's not going anywhere. So how the heck am I going to get in that net, and be the starter? And so in his situation, I thought it was okay for his situation. You'd like everything to be a lot more discreet, a lot more quiet, but sometimes that's just not going to be the case because, he's a highly touted first-round draft pick as a goaltender, and now he wants out of your organization. So, Nashville might have seen it like, maybe he's not developing like we thought. UC Saros for the next, even if it's 5 years of the next 8 years of the deal, UC Saros will be a better goaltender than Askarov, and I'm only speaking out loud here. Then heck, let's move this kid along and give him a fair fighting chance, and we'll get some assets brought our way and make a move for him. So, but on the other side of it, you did mention, Struddy, that will there be a target on the back? Well, I think we all know which players, whether it's Cutter Gauthier, how that turned out. I'm going to be watching these players real closely and finding out what are the strengths of these players. What were they afraid of? What was going on when they made that kind of decision? And at the same time, I applauded at that time the great work of Jonesy and Briere in Philly and of Pat Verbeek in Anaheim for making a deal that no one had a sniff of. Probably even Gord Miller didn't have a sniff of that one. Am I right?
Not a sniff. I was fast asleep on that one, Panger.
When Gord doesn't have a sniff on it, you know they're ultimately very, very discreet. That's all I know.
Panger, I want to get from a goalie, the on-ice perspective for Askarov. What is going to be his biggest challenge going from where he was, kind of hitting the minors, to now San Jose on a team that is clearly, hopefully hit rock bottom and moving up?
Well, one thing he's going to have is the ability to express himself, in that market. I believe, I think he'll be a fan favorite because he's got a lot of fun to his game, a lot of athleticism to his game. He plays the puck real well, and he can make spectacular saves. He's going to get away with a lot more there because it's not going to be a good team for a few years. Those are the facts. So there's no pressure on you. I mean, it's I'm not comparing him to Connor Bedard last year, but I had a chance in Connor's first season to be, to broadcast over 50 games of the Blackhawks with Connor. And, there are things that every young player playing on a team that's going to be in the bottom five get away with. They're not going to get away with it in 3 or 4 years, whether it be a long shift or whether cheating on the offensive side of it and giving up an odd man rush. We all know the hockey terminology and what it is and what it isn't. But as the team gets better, the expectations are going to get higher and the magnifying glass is going to get brighter. But for right now, Askarov's going to go there and he's going to charm people to death, in my opinion. He's going to have a fresh start. And he has spent 2 years in the minors, so it's not like he's coming right from the KHL or from college hockey or from junior hockey and he's expected to be, godsend for them. He'll have good tutelage there. They still have great goaltending advisors there, and I'm sure he's going to learn a lot and actually give us a lot to talk about because he is kind of an entertaining sort from what I've seen.
I've watched him play since the under 18s. I can tell you he's a very entertaining sort. Before we go, Pang, I want to ask you about the situation in Vancouver because, I think a lot of people view the Canucks as a team really, that has turned it around quickly, and a big part of that is Thatcher Demko. But we saw the situation in the playoffs where it was kind of nebulous, and now it looks like he won't be available for training camp or even the start of the regular season. What do you make of what's going on there?
Yeah, that's really, really, really tough to take. That for sure. I don't know anything, other than he's been injury plagued, and all I know is that when I watch him play, I think he's one of the elite goaltenders in the league. Gord, I don't know about you, but boy, have I seen some great goaltending from him. That all being said, I was really impressed with how Rick Tocchet and their coaching staff last year managed it because I was in that series. I'm not sure how many games I did of the Nashville Vancouver series, but when Stolarz came, did I say his last name right? I think
Stolarz,
yeah, right? Stolarz?
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Right? Pretty close.
You landed it, Pang.
Anyway,
we need more Pangs, but we need more Pangs in the league, but yeah. You're good.
we need more, shorter names. Yeah, Pang is easier to spell than Nieuwendyk, those kind of names. But I was totally impressed. I think every player had full confidence in them. So that is going to go a long way in starting the season for the Vancouver Canucks. And looks like he's going to be a horse for a long period of time as well.
Darren, before you go, little Leaf talk here. These guys that normally run this show, they have a game called Level of Concern. And what is your level of concern that the Maple Leafs are going to go with a goaltending tandem that consists of a couple of guys in Joseph Woll and Anthony Stolarz, who really haven't played a lot of NHL hockey? I believe the career high in games played for both of them is 28 and under. What do you make of that?
Again, health. I mean, like we're talking about Demko. I mean, Joseph Woll is he's got to prove that he is a legitimate number one goaltender, and a large part of that is how healthy you are. I mean, every one of the number one guys that have been in this league for 100 years have been guys that have withstood injury, played through injury, or just, quite frankly, were efficient enough in the net to not get injured. But there's no denying Joseph's ability. And I think Stolarz is an excellent complement to any goaltender. I think it's fair to say that he's not a number one goaltender, but for a short amount of time, he can handle some hard work. He just hasn't been able to prove it in the long run for whatever reason. But I like Anthony. I like his work ethic. I like the size of him. But at the end of the day, it's Joseph Woll's net, and he's got to prove that he can be a healthy guy. I really enjoy watching Joseph play. The other news, too, I just was looking at some goaltending stuff. Brossoit is out 5 to 7 weeks after a meniscus repair, and that's a real blow to the Hawks that signed him in the offseason, try to complement he and Peter Mrazek and let Soderblom start in the minors, and looks like that's not going to be the case, or he'll be at least be ready right before the training camp, right before the season starts on October
it's
I don't know what it is.
It's amazing how things can go south before the puck even gets dropped in regular season opener. Panger, thanks for talking to us. We'll see you down the trail, as always, and we'll have a glass of vino together.
That sounds awfully good. I might just uncork something right now, just because you mentioned it.
Perfect. Panger, thanks for talking to us.
Okay.
There's Darren Pang joining us on Overdrive. We'll be back with Jim Duquette at the top of the hour. The longtime Major League Baseball executive will join us. So will Mark Ross later on from the NFL Network. But right now it's Overdrive on TSN2, the TSN app, and your home speakers. Back on Overdrive, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. That's Street Fighting Man by the Rolling Stones. Jason Strudwick was not a street fighting man. He was occasionally an ice fighting man. But we have an interesting sort of conundrum coming up in L.A. This basketball season, because LeBron James is, in all likelihood, going to play with his son Bronny. And on The Shop on HBO, LeBron was asked a pretty important question. What will Bronny call him?
Have you thought through, not relationship, because you'll always be his dad, he'll always be his son, but what's your working relationship? Is he going to call you dad at practice in the locker room?
No, we already laid that. No, he can't. We already laid that down. He cannot call me dad in the workplace. All right. Once we leave out of the private facility and the gates close, I could be dad again. Okay. In the car, if we ride together. Okay. At home, I could be dad. No, he got to call me like 2-3 or Bron. Okay. Or, GOAT if he wants to. It's up to him. I mean, it's up to him. But it's easy for me. It's easy for me because I've been calling him Bronny for so long. Yeah. It's not like I've been calling, hey son. So it's easy for me. It's gonna be the adjustment for him. But we cannot be running down the court. And he'd be like, Dad, push the ball down. Dad, no, you cannot do that.
And you know what? It's funny, but it's also funny because it's true. And there's a dynamic here. And Struddy, we've seen it in hockey when you have, siblings on a team. We saw it in Calgary. Remember when Dougie Hamilton's brother got sent down to the American League? He was upset. They used to say about the Sutter twins, if he yelled at one, the other one would go in the tank. So how do the Lakers manage this? Like, what if Bronny's on the bench too long? Or what if he's not getting minutes? Like, how are they going to manage this?
I think this is an incredibly difficult situation for Bronny, the son. I really think this is tough. I'm a dad, and I obviously love to see your kids live out their dreams. But is he ready for this challenge? Is he going to be able to play? Is he going to be put in situations maybe he's not ready for or unable to do? From all the reports I've heard, he's going to have to be a good defensive player, and it's not exactly what LeBron was built his career on, right? So I feel bad for the son. I think it's a really, really tough spot, Feschuk. Really tough spot.
Oh, I feel really bad for Bronny. You're right, Struddy. This is a creation that's about LeBron, for LeBron, and it's got nothing to do with Bronny. This is about a guy saying, I want to play with my son, who suddenly says, oh, son, you can't call me dad? Like, it makes no sense. Like, there's nothing, natural about it. I've been writing about this today, and I was looking it up. Like, there's been very few kind of precedents in sports, right? But, when Ken Griffey Jr. played with Ken Griffey Sr., Griffey Sr. always said, like, you're my teammate, but Junior always called Senior dad. Yeah. When Mark Howe played alongside Gordie Howe.
Mark and Marty, yeah.
Yeah, and Marty. Yeah. There's a couple anecdotes out there, like Harry Neal telling stories of Mark calling across the ice when Gordy had the puck, like, Dad, pass it to me.
I love it.
And
also Gordy beating the crap out of people that look sideways at Mark.
But there's a difference between those situations and Bronny's. Griffey Jr., Hall of Famer. Mark Howe, Hall of Famer. Yeah. Bronny does not deserve the 4-year contract the Lakers just gave him at his daddy's behest.
Well,
it's tough.
That is tough. And should the Lakers have passed on him?
Well, if LeBron tells you, what are you going to say? You talk
about players having power, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Barry Trotz telling us earlier that NHL players have more power. Nothing like NBA players.
No.
Are they the most empowered
it's hard
players in
to
sports?
live in your dad's shadow or have to grow up in your dad's shadow. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't that. Or fortunately for my kids, I wasn't exactly an all-star.
So they don't have that. A long time, though.
Yeah, that's fair. But I mean, it's I can only imagine if your father was a Hall of Famer and you're trying to play hockey, or in anything, it doesn't matter. Whatever you do, a lawyer or a doctor, and try to live in that light or in that shadow, whatever the case may be. So I wouldn't have wanted my son on that team if I was LeBron. Let him make his own pass somewhere else. And you know what? He might not have made it. Maybe he would have, but whatever, it would have been his journey instead of kind of holding on to your coattails.
And that's the point. Bronny has said, this wasn't my dream. It's my dad's.
Right.
Yeah.
It's been a lively 2 hours so far in Overdrive. Struddy, catch your breath. We'll come back with hour 3 on TSN2, the TSN app, and your home speakers.